Welcome back to the Gufs Circa 2020 podcast. Again, joined by Goran. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are tonight tackling Songs of Life, the second album released by the band in 92, correct? There it is.
Yeah, I think it was 92.
Yeah, 92, I thought.
Yeah. It says so right here, so it's got to be true.
It's got to be true, right? You always believe everything you read, just like the internet, right?
Absolutely.
So we've moved on to the second phase. One of the big things I think we want to discuss in this episode is the progression from Staring into the Sun to Songs of Life. I think there's a huge difference between the two. And like I texted you earlier, I had listened to Staring into the Sun in probably 10 years. And some of your comments ring true, but I was curious as to how did this major progression between the two albums, because there's a lot of songs on Songs of Life that are still played today. So when you look back and you think, almost 30 years ago, what was kind of happening in the Gufs camp at that time?
When we put out Staring, we were listening to a lot of college rock, which would be REM, Canals, Guadalcanal Diary. And it was very jangly. When we started thinking about where the band was at and we were getting more popular, we started taking ourselves a little bit more seriously. And as we were listening to different types of music, I think it had a lot to do with what we thought our next album should sound like, because we felt that maybe Staring to the Sun was a little, rookie, a little naive. So Songs of Life was more of a conscious effort to try to be, cool, try to be following some of the bands that we were digging at the time. And like we talked about, my biggest influence at that time all of a sudden became Toto with Sprocket, who I thought was just super cool and moody. And when I think of Songs of Life, I think that's when I learned the E minor chord, which is probably my favorite chord still to date.
Which is two fingers.
It is. It's an easy chord, but it's such a powerful and emotional chord. We went into it thinking, let's make this a little bit more of a production. Let's introduce more piano, which is what I was classically trained at. Let's do, let's write songs that might be telling of who we are in the moment, but let's write something that fans could maybe dig their teeth into and say that, wow, this is getting a little bit more powerful. They're getting more mature. So it was just the next right step. And when you listen to all those records from Staring to Songs to Circa, which was really a rehash of stuff around the Staring time and before, and then as we get into Collide, there's a maturity, there's an edge, there's an attitude, and that was also happening lyrically. So I think it was just a conscious effort to try to be deeper with our writing. And when you're 20 years old, 21 at the time, 22, you could only be so deep. We didn't have a lot to draw from. Life was good. So when I look at Songs of Life, it's really a positive, feel-good album. There's a lot of positivity, and there's a lot of, learning, and there's a lot of like what I think life can be like. And it was a great time, and things were starting to roll. We were starting to get bigger, and we were starting to take ourselves more seriously, and the venue size kept growing. So it was a cool time to be in the band and in the early 90s recording that record.
But there's such a huge, like I said, and I hate to beat a dead horse here, but there is, like I said, there's an immense jump. And so what, you talked a little bit about your inspiration, but how do you, as a songwriter, craft or work on your craft, like we talked about, as far as what I write about, how it all transpires, how it all goes together? Because there had to be, like I said, you took yourself more seriously at that point, but there's a craft to it. and kind of walk me through that process from we got done with Staring Into the Sun. We're now moving on to Songs of Life. I mean, there had to be, was it just the fan base that was growing and you kind of saw this movement growing? I mean, because, you came from a musical background, but, everyone wants to start a college rock band. It doesn't necessarily ever turn into a 30-year endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think stylistically, we were getting better as a band. We were playing better. When you only know a few chords, you're going to write only what you kind of know. There's only a few songs, vibes that you can write. As you become better at your instrument, you start pushing the envelope. And I think that was our attempt to push the envelope. So when we're listening to Toad the Wet Sprocket or U2, bands that are a little bit more deep. I always thought REM was kind of deep, but it was still kind of playful to me. So it was just the natural kind of progression. We wrote by jamming a lot. So we would sit in a room and, somebody would play a cool riff. Morgan would play a cool riff, or Scott would play a cool groove. And I just think that we were just trying to write good songs. And as a songwriter, as you get better, your kind of approach to things changes. Like my approach now is completely different than my approach back then. I couldn't start a song today without a title, without some type of idea of what I want to talk about. Back then we were jamming, we would start playing The Chosen, and that turned into, what did those chords evoke? What kind of feeling did they, make me want to talk about? So I don't think we knew what we were doing, to be honest with you. It was the next natural thing as I got better as a guitar player, as I got better as a piano player in a rock band versus a classically trained player. I wanted to sound like the Smiths. I wanted to sound like Echo and the Bunnymen. I wanted to sound like Toad. So you start just, feeding off of some of those influences. And I do the same thing today when I write. There's artists out there that I will hear a song and I love, and I'll be like, wow, I wonder what I would do if I had that kind of groove or that vibe or that chord progression. And there's only so many chords that you can really use. And it's crazy to think that the same chords are just being used over and over again. And there's so many different ways you can interpret them. But we were just trying to be cool. We were trying to be progressive. We were trying to make things sound different than Staring into the Sun. We wanted to be taken more seriously. So I think that's what that was. And life was good. Like, we were in college. We were dating college girls. We were going to parties and we were playing soccer. And Dan was 18 or 19 and still getting into bars. So life was good. And when I listen to that record, it's feel good, Kiss the Sky.
It is.
Sweet Sound. It's all positive stuff.
So at this point, what was the difference, I suppose, in a fan base or traction that you were getting from, all right, we put an album out, it's like we said, classic college indie rock. We started to take ourselves more seriously. So when you look at the fan base and how things have progressed, what were the venues you were playing and were you getting booked? And was there any sort of traction that you were starting to get at this point as far as, a contract, recording contract, or any sort of, regional success?
The shows just kept getting bigger. We started off at the Unicorn in the basement there to 25 people, to the Boardwalk, 25 grew to 50, to the Celebrity Club, which grew to 100, 150, to Shank Hall. I don't think we were at Shank Hall just yet, but I remember we were packing the Celebrity Club, which at that time was a big thing to do. It was a cool venue. If you were packing that venue, then you were doing pretty good. And Staring at the Sun was out, so people were sharing it. It's crazy to think that if we didn't put that CD out, it wouldn't have taken us to where we're at right now, because it was pivotal to the next step. Like, without you guys being able to take a CD and burn it and give it to somebody, or cassette and burn it and give it to somebody and share it, that's how we shared things back then. It was more physical. Now we just press a button and you share it, and you can share it to millions. But back then you had to do some legwork, and we started a mailing list. We started getting merch. So things were booming. So when we put out Songs of Life, we're like, what would be the next step? And I remember the owner of the Boardwalk had a club downtown, which was called the Hunt Club, I think. And like 92, we decided to like have a record release at the Hunt Club, which, I mean, that might have been 400, 500, 600 people, like that big of a room. And it was packed. I remember walking on stage like we were rock stars. It was so cool, and it was just a fun time to be in the band. And
so help me relive that show. So now we're starting to come about, starting to gain, some serious, Milwaukee action. Hope that came over right. That doesn't sound right, but anyway,
I was getting a lot of action back then.
Yeah,
Not just in Milwaukee.
Yeah, you just apparently we're sharing a brain, but to have something that is progressed to that point. So you just said you felt like a rock star. So this is basically the first time that you feel the Gufs have arrived. So walk me through that show. Tell me about the guy with this is Wisconsin. So the guy in the front row that had two teeth, or the people that got too drunk in the back, and explain kind of the feeling behind it, and what songs did you perform? Paint the whole picture. Bring me in.
Well, at the time, I remember walking on stage and the place was packed, and for some reason we always attracted a lot of girls, which was cool. But the first 10, 15 rows were always girls, and it's kind of fun to be a young...
Still is.
Yeah, it still is. I always tell people it's like that's why we got really popular, is because where the girls go and where the girls are at, that's where the boys decide to show up. So I think you guys all had to like us at some point. But we were big into making it sound good. I remember Tony, who was the original guitar player, was doing our sound, and we're renting from Clearwing and all these places and putting a lot of time and money into making sure that it sounded good. The stage was high enough. We had those Gufs banners that we used to use with the sign language, which we thought was so cool. We had Brian Pettit starting to kind of introduce him as, the fifth Guff, and adding that element, which we always thought was a cool texture, until the writing really changed and got really moody towards Holiday from You, and it just wasn't the right texture. But walking on, you felt on top of the world. You felt like, wow, maybe you got the Violent Femmes, you got Pat McCurdy, you got Bodines, maybe the Gufs could be the next, the next band that could help take the city to a different level. And there's no cooler feeling than going up there and playing songs off of Staring, which, Staring at the Sun, playing songs like Contradictions, which was a big fan favorite. And then when you look at this record, you've got songs like Everything, which was a huge crowd song, Life Sweet Sound, which is a big crowd favorite, The Chosen, which was moody, and just at that time when we were writing everything I wanted to write, I wanted it to sound like The Chosen, because it sounded like something Toad would do. And I told you, I think on one of the earlier
Yeah.
shows, it was kind of a nod to them.
So what's the inspiration behind The Chosen? Selfishly, I'm going to ask that question. So
A lot of the songs back then were inspired by classes that I would take at UWM, and I, for some reason, became very close with an older teacher, a good buddy of mine, Rob, who was at the time we called the fifth Guf because he had a Suburban, so he would help us drive from show to show and pack everything in. He was also my first friend in Milwaukee. So I remember all of a sudden I've got soccer practice early the next day, and I hear this pounding on the door, and here walks in this guy. He's like, "Hey, I'm your roommate. I'm drunk. I need a place to stay." And we had suites at that time at UW Milwaukee. So you pound the door and it's like it enters to 3 rooms. He's like, "That's my room. I'm just going to go in there and crash." And that's how Rob entered my life. And he's still, he entered with a bang, and he still is one of our greatest friends. He's at every show and we love him like a brother. And I remember, I don't know what we're talking about before that though.
we were looking at the inspiration behind The Chosen.
So was taking a lot of classes, and Rob and I decided to take a bunch of classes on the Holocaust, which at UWM, there was a wonderful teacher, Esther, I still remember her name, older lady who survived the Holocaust or had family that survived the Holocaust. And I remember reading books like Night by Elie Wiesel, and
Great book.
Under Breath was kind of off of that. And there's a handful of songs that were off of that feeling of like, wow, what would it be like to be living in that? We're so lucky. Like, I'm 20 years old and I'm so lucky that my life is this, and I'm playing music and I've got all this stuff at my disposal, and I'm in school and soccer and, dating and life and family, everything is good. So, you just start drawing from things. And I started drawing inspiration from some of the stories that she would tell. And The Chosen was kind of like one of those stories where, what if you were chosen? What if you were one of the chosen ones that wasn't so lucky? And that's what that song was about. Under Breath was kind of the same thing. And Under Breath's kind of a powerful, feel-good song, but it's really lyrically. And I don't like to talk about lyrics a lot because it's something different for somebody that I might have intended it to be something, but somebody else might draw something else from it. So I never, I don't want somebody who had a song get them through a hard time for them to hear that I wrote it about like my dog. That would be bad.
Yeah.
So I don't like to talk about stories, although, a lot of the newer stuff is obvious what the story's all about.
So Hero is about your dog, right? That's
Yeah.
what you're telling us.
It's actually about finding somebody that inspires you, that could be a mentor. And for that, it's a cat that I have. It's not about a dog. It's about a cat.
No, I get it, and we'll not press you too.
That was a joke. It's not about a cat.
I know, and I was moving past it quickly, but thank God you're not a stand-up comedian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But
good thing I write songs and sing songs.
Yeah, fantastic ones. But I get it. There's a lot of stuff in hearing what The Chosen was based on, and I kind of had that same feel, ironically, which in hearing you say that, I'm like, that was kind of where I came to. But you're right. At any point, there's a lot of your music that has gotten people through hard times, and when you write a song and you think about that, does that play into, I'm writing this because a lot of people can identify with things that you've written about, and especially a lot of the heartbreak material, a lot of things that really kind of strike to your heart. Is this more of is this something you kind of have a consideration for when you think about, do you think about your fans? Do you think about,
yeah,
or you're telling a story, but you're also trying to identify. And I think that's we'll touch on that more in your individual, the Goran efforts. But when even back then, is this something that it was a consideration?
Back then, honestly, it wasn't, because we didn't know what we were doing. But I started realizing that we were writing songs that people got something out of. And on that record, it was a song called For a Ride.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, that's been a wedding song for a lot of people. To this day, when we're playing shows, I'm doing acoustic shows, it's like people still want to hear For a Ride. And I get it. That song was written about the person that you were in love with, the person that you couldn't stand being 2 feet away from and minutes away from. So I get it. And I think I started realizing the power of connecting with people emotionally. We weren't trying to at that time. We were just trying to write songs that people liked. But now, as a songwriter, every time I'm trying to write something, if it doesn't connect to somebody that's listening, then I've failed as a songwriter.
That's a pretty lofty goal. I mean, because you have a lot to say, and you have had a lot to, and have said a lot. But I mean, that's a pretty lofty goal, and I think it's an admirable one when you look at the scope of everything you've done. But we'll get off Songs of Life here for a second. But do you get feedback from fans like what we just talked about? I think in Sheboygan, at the last song you guys played was a couple that had it played at their wedding.
Yeah.
And so when I look at situations like that, I mean, do you get a lot more of that, just based upon, fan encounters and things that happen?
Do I get a lot more requests for songs like that? Or do I get a lot more desire to write songs that connect with people?
Both, I guess. I mean, do you get people requesting, or identifying with stuff that you wrote? I mean, what kind of feedback do you get? And do you also get, the same thing where people use that as a song for the, momentous part of their life?
Yeah, I get a lot of emails and a lot of, what do they call them? DMs? Is that what they call them nowadays?
Sure. Got me.
Yeah. I'm not very tech savvy, so I don't know. When somebody messages you on Facebook, what that's called, or whatever, on social media. Yeah, it started happening with Holiday from You. That's when we connected like amazingly with people, and I had no clue that we could on that level. And it's crazy how that record was just raw emotion, and I lived every word of that record. And I realized that there's something more to this than just me writing a song that people like. It was a cathartic experience for me to write Holiday from You. Every time I write a song, I leave a piece of me with that song, hoping that somebody's going to connect to it and say, hey, that helped me get through this.
Right.
Songs like Where Are You Now, which was written around 2000, 2001. And that song was initially inspired by a fan that passed away. I remember being on the road with Matchbox 20, and a big fan of ours, I remember her name, Erin, would come to all the shows, and we got a call while we were on the road that she passed. And like, wow. And immediately you turn towards songs. I remember writing Happily Ever After in Connecticut, in this house we're all stuck in. It's our second record, and we're hoping that we can write a great album that can help take us to the next level. So pressure's on, but we were all going through serious breakups. That the road from touring behind the Gufs at First Atlantic Record, it took a toll on us, and everybody went through massive breakups. I mean, not just like, yeah, I was dating somebody for a year, but marriages. And so you start writing about those types of feelings. But to me, it's all about connecting. It's all about having somebody say, thank you for writing that. That really, you said what I was feeling. I couldn't just get it out. And now that makes me feel better. I'm able to get through something a little bit better. Back in the day, we had no clue. I didn't know that Life Sweet Sound, somebody would take something positively from that. But now that's the only way I know how to write. And I'm honored. I'm honored that at that last show that somebody wanted to hear a song that was at their wedding. And I was kind of prepared to play the song. I kind of wasn't, but you just go with it. And I remember they were dancing.
Yeah, they were right down the aisle from us. Yeah.
So
no, it's just interesting to hear that, because you wonder at what point does that evolve? Because I mean, as you're starting a band, you write songs, that you just to get noticed, but at some point you connect. It's a fantastic story. I think it's heartbreak and
it is heartbreak. And I'm going to get a little bit deeper.
Sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you don't have to apologize. But that was my wedding song.
Really?
And I wrote that for my wife. And I love her dearly, but we're not really together anymore. So imagine me singing that song to them, but they don't know what I'm feeling.
Right.
Or know that if you actually listen to the recording of it, I think there's a moment where I break up a little bit, because all of a sudden I realized what I was singing. Here I am singing a song that was their wedding song, but it was a song that I wrote for my wife. It was our wedding song. And here I am in a completely different situation where, that's the power of music. That's why I write it. That's why, I love doing it. And I don't do it to the level that I used to, but I still enjoy writing and giving people something to listen to, and hope that it connects and helps them get through, whatever they're going through their life.
And we talked about that when you were doing Under the Nashville Sky, in your independent stuff. And we're getting way off topic, but that's fine. This is a great conversation. You were talking about how things were going to get deeper, and your independent work is one drink away is insane. I mean, that is, I cannot stop listening to that. I mean, it's fantastic, but I think it's great that you're able to convey that, to your fans and to all of us out here that identify exactly with what you're going through, that have been through similar situations, and thank you so much for opening up with us tonight. And I think I'm clamoring for words right now. So
yeah,
but I can't thank you enough for that. But if you're ready, we can do Life Sweet Sound. If that works for you.
I'm ready to play it.
Yeah.
This song was, I remember when we were getting courted by Atlantic Records, and we had to figure out, we had the VP coming, Craig Coleman was coming. It was 95. And we needed a place to play. So we ended up playing downtown in that outdoor little amphitheater that's next to the Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
And we just needed a place to play. The timing was perfect. The guy that found us, Nick Castanelli from Atlantic Records, he was coming in a week or two earlier, and we're like, we're playing some really shitty dive in Chicago. We're like, we don't want him there. He's got to see us in Milwaukee. And we were just naive. We thought we needed to impress him, but we had Crash on the radio and Smile on the radio in Milwaukee that was blowing up. So he wanted to come and just make sure that we actually knew how to plug our guitars in, and that
you existed.
That we existed, that we looked okay, that we could, play decently. So he's like, no. I want to meet the guys. We'll get Craig in after I meet the guys. And I remember Craig coming in town, and here we're playing this little amphitheater, and it was packed. I mean, it was like rows deep. Like, I think you can only fit so many hundred in the seats. It's a really cool amphitheater.
Yeah.
And then it was just packed deep. So here it is. He comes in and just absolutely floored. And I remember he, after the show was done, he loved Life Sweet Sound. And he goes, if we're going to sign this deal, he's like, you guys, I want that song on the record. So there's a couple different versions of Life Sweet Sound. And I love the song, but we never played it really well live.
Mm-hmm.
It just was a really weird tempo and groove. And it's probably one of the reasons why we don't play it that much, because it just doesn't lend itself to rocking out like maybe Smile does. It doesn't lend itself to rocking out like Crash does, but I can see why people liked it. And at that time, I probably thought it was the best song that we've ever written. So I think if I'm going to play a song off of Songs of Life, it probably has to be this song.
Well, it's a rare appearance.
Hope you like it.
We will.
Goes something like this. As time draws nearer and turn the final page, though my life becomes clearer, turn to you as I watch it fade away. We used to have so much, I thought we had it all. I reach for things I couldn't touch. I turn to you as I watch myself fall. And I will find a better place, a different time. We will climb too high. As I look in the mirror, I see dreams of darker days. Though my mind becomes clearer, I think of you as I watch it fade away. We used to have so much, I thought we had it all. I reach for things I couldn't touch. Turn to you as I watch myself fall. And I will find a better place, a different time. We will climb too high. So listen to my goodbye. Today I'll sing a new song. Tomorrow learn to carry on. The fountain of time won't track you down. So listen to that sweet sound, that sweet sound. Now my life's become clearer. I write the final page. Though the end draws nearer, I turn to you as I watch it slip away. I will find a better place different time. We will climb too high. So listen to my vibe. Today I'll sing a new song. Tomorrow learn to carry on. Fountain of time won't drag you down. So listen to my sweet sound today. Tomorrow, fountain of time, that sweet love. Listen up, everything's okay. Listen up. Yeah, we'll make it good again. Nope. When I listen to myself playing that, there's a couple of things that are strikingly obvious to me that are missing in today's Gufs music or Goran music. Like it takes like almost like a minute and a half to even get to the chorus, which I think is kind of crazy. And back in the day, we were writing songs that were so fucking loud. Actually, they were so fucking long. It's like a song like that, it's like 5 minutes. Like that would never get played on the radio. So if you listen to the Songs Alive version and you compare it to the Gufs Atlantic release, it's different. So we edited some stuff, and we did that for some other songs. Like we changed some things for Give Back Yourself. We changed some things for Last Goodbye, but we'll get into that, I guess, next time.
I realized it was a very long version, but there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's I think acoustically it's a fantastic song. I mean, the way you just performed it versus the album record, I would probably take the way you just did it. So, I mean, when you say it's something you rarely perform live, I think there's so much acoustic value to it. I mean, it's phenomenal. I'm sitting here staring at Molly and Tom, and I'm just blown. My mind's blown. You know, I mean, how cool is this?
Yeah. Well, that's why we played it when we did our 30-year anniversary. It was a song that needed to be played. So.
No, it's another one of those like Lake 17. What else is on that list? I know I teased you about Lake 17. Yeah. I still want to know where Lake 17 is.
Yeah, we'll talk about that because that's kind of an interesting little story.
But it does. But it started to come along shortly after this time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Goran, thank you again so much for tonight. That was fantastic. I still again speechless. So thank you again, and tune into further episodes. And like we always say, any questions you have for the band, please send us, and we will tackle them here. Goran, have a good night, and we'll talk to you next week.
Peace. All right.